it's Carrie. Thank you so much for joining me on this latest episode of Invisible Wounds Healing from Trauma. And I am so glad that we're walking the path towards healing together. So just a quick reminder, I'm not a clinician, counselor, or physician. I'm a certified trauma support specialist with lots of lived experience with trauma. Also, the information presented in this podcast is for educational purposes only and not meant to replace any treatment by a doctor or licensed professional. And I am so excited today that we have as a guest the amazing Jana Wilson. Jana Wilson is an emotional healing educator, meditation teacher, retreat leader, heart math facilitator, public speaker, hypnotherapist, author, and founder of the Emotional Healing System. Jana trained and worked with best-selling author and physician Deepak Chopra, Dr. Brian Weiss, and New York Times best-selling author Debbie Ford. And her new book, Wise Little One, coming out on July the 12th, 2023, tells the story of her personal experiences of child abuse and trauma. And she tells her story through the voice of her inner child. So please check out her website, janawilson.com, news and information about her group, semi-private and private retreats, and exciting updates. Jana, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carrie. It's lovely to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here. And, you know, in getting to know more about you and the work that you do and your writing, I am absolutely amazed at what you do and how much your work connects with other people. And it's so intentional and thoughtful and meaningful. And, you know, I love, one of my favorite things that you do is, you know, the tone of your book, Wise Little One, about your inner child. How did you even determine that A, you had an inner child, and B, that your inner child needed that attention and that healing and that work?
Well, it wasn't until my 20s that, I began to understand inner child work through the work of John Bradshaw. He was a author and public speaker, PhD, a psychotherapist, and his work really opened my eyes to my childhood trauma at a young age in my early 20s. And then, I had an experience at 12 years old through trauma where I was pulled out of my body. It was really a near-death experience that the trauma brought on. From fear, I'm praying and asking to be saved, to be from this chaos that's going on at the moment my dad was beating my mother. And I was pulled out of my body and I was told those weren't my parents and this isn't my life, this was. And I felt that peace that passes all understanding. And, so that experience woke me up to, okay, these people might be my parents or other adults, but if they're not acting respectable or just because they're older than me doesn't mean anything. So I began at a young age to really get my voice and to, really feel that I was being guided, like always, like I had a deep spiritual connection. And that, our inner child really is just a word, Carrie, for our feeling self. Because when we're little, birth to 7, we're all emotion. And so because I was woken up, really my soul was awakened at such a young age, it set me on a trajectory very young to heal my childhood, because in adverse childhood experiences, I scored 10 out of 10. So I had a lot of chaos. And I got pregnant right out of college. And of course, I didn't want to raise my daughter the same way my parents raised me. So I knew I had to get to work.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's incredible. I didn't have even any understanding of the existence of an inner child in myself until I was in my 30s. And I began to really question, my struggle was my relationship with my father. He was so abusive, and yet I craved his attention, and I, craved his approval, which, I tried all kinds of outlandish things to get that. And of course, that didn't work well.
Yeah. you got attention. It just wasn't positive.
No, it was not a good plan. But, that I connected the fact that the little girl in me always wanted the daddy that I wanted him to be, not the person he was.
Right.
And that was the moment for me, wait a minute, what's going on with that? And, but it was, like I said, not until my 30s. And, I'm almost 60 now, So, and it's still a work in progress. So the fact that you had that kind of insight and that kind of awakening at such a young age is incredible to me.
Well, I think, I am a soul. So I know my soul is a pretty old soul. And so I feel like my soul had a mission. And when, at a young age, I was being guided to certain books, certain teachers, certain teachings, and they felt like home, like a homecoming. Like I knew the truth,
Right.
The truth, because it sets you free.
Right.
And so I began to look at my parents, and, my mom was diagnosed with several diagnoses, mental illness, but back then they called it manic depressive, right? So it's bipolar. She was diagnosed with borderline personality and clinically depressed. So my mom would, I had to look at a young age. I didn't have to, but this was the question that came to me. Not sure quite how it came.
Right.
Might have been after reading Dr. Weiss's book, Many Lives, Many Masters. That book really changed my life and opened my eyes to the possibility. We don't know what happens when we die,
right.
But we have a choice to choose a belief system that empowers us versus disempowers us. So I was at that place because at 12 years old, I had a direct connection to the God. I was being told, you don't have to be a Christian for my love. You're not going to go to heaven and hell. Like, none of that is right. And so I was questioning everything.
Right.
So because I already had that understanding, I wasn't living in a fearful, constricted state. Right. I mean, it was still a little there because when you're, the intergenerational trauma and just, handed down to me, that belief system was very strong, but it also provided a foundation for me to heal because my trauma is what made me so spiritual.
Right. Which is incredible because, for me, it did the same. It did the opposite. I remember the night, and I was raised in the Catholic faith, and I remember the night that faith broke. And the moment it happened. And, I have been on this quest to really find a spiritual niche for, and that was at 13 for the rest of my life. I explore all of these things and still have, all of these questions. So, it's sort of an open-ended thing, but knowing that you have that deep driven, guide within you and without you is huge.
Yeah. I think, do you meditate?
Meditation for me has always been tough. I make positive time to try and quiet my mind. And
so try.
Yeah,
Try means struggle. So just
yes,
say, I struggle to
I
quiet my
do.
mind.
Then yes.
So this is the reason why people don't meditate, because they don't understand it. You have to have a teacher. You
right.
have to have someone teach you, because that's a myth of meditating, is to quiet the mind.
Right. Well, and yes, that is true. That is true. And that was going to be something I was going to ask you. If you, what is the first, because I know I've talked to a lot of people out in my audience that have the same struggle, you know. And so what is the first basic step if you want to meditate? What's the first basic step that you have to have in place?
Well, first of all, we put money as energy. That's why it's called currency. It's flow, right? Sometimes it's dammed up.
Yes.
So whenever you invest money into something, you're saying, I value this. Every person and I've taught almost 1,000 people to meditate, and a career of 15 years as a meditation teacher. And, when I ask this question, nobody has a teacher. So nobody has invested money to go learn from someone how to meditate. And herein lies the problem. So you don't have a teacher, so then you don't know. You have to learn. People think, oh, how hard is it? Well, it's hard, as you know.
It is. Yes, it is.
So there's a couple of ways I look at it. Okay, so the point of the practice is to be aware when you're lost in thought. So you build a muscle. So you sit for 30 minutes every morning. And as the mind wanders, I teach people a mantra, which is helpful because it keeps them fixated on something. But every time the mind wanders lost in thought and you become aware of it, you're just building a muscle of awareness. Oh, lost in thought, take a deep breath, come back to the mantra, back to present moment. And the meditation practice. So eventually the mind wears down. The time accelerates. It goes by really fast. When that starts to happen, you've surrendered. You're not putting up a fight. But there's a part of you that you haven't mastered. And that, I'd liken it to you're a slave to your thoughts. You're not a master of them. Once you can master them by sitting every day, it's spiritual hygiene. Because when you sit to meditate, there's so many things happening physically, right? All the stress response, you go into rest and digest. It's so healthy. Deepak and Dr. Simon, his partner, both physicians would say, if we were diagnosed with something, we only had one thing we could choose, regardless of what the diagnosis is, cancer, anything, and we could only choose one thing, it'd be meditation. Mm-hmm. The body, when you meditate, is getting a message, and rest and digest, everything's fine. Our body is miraculous. So it goes in and heals and does everything it needs to do. We're not working against it. But when you're entertaining thoughts all day long, 50 to 70,000 of stressful thoughts, right? Just thought alone can create the stress response. There's no tiger in front of me, but I'm thinking a thought, and my body's behaving as if I'm about to get mauled by a tiger.
Yes.
So you start, I think, number one, you need a teacher. I mean, I didn't stay consistent with meditation or understand what the heck I was doing until I paid my $375 and went to the Chopra Center, and they taught me how to meditate over 3 sessions. That was a game changer for me. And it's foundational in emotional intelligence. If you're not self-aware, you can't manage your emotions, which is self-regulation.
Absolutely.
And so it's foundational. I won't work with anyone who won't commit to a practice. A lot of people, I meditate when I run.
How can you do that?
Yeah. It's stillness and silence.
Right.
You must be still. Once you still the body not to move, the mind will follow, because the mind follows the body.
Right.
And because there's more energy, the electromagnetic field of our heart is stronger than our brain. So it's like 3 to 5 feet from the heart. The brain's only an inch, the electromagnetic field. So it's a lesser, but most people stay in their head listening to all those thoughts, thinking they're their reality or the truth. And half of it, research shows, isn't. It's false memories.
Right.
So meditation is key, and it's life changing, right? Because you're telling your emotional self, AKA your little wise one, your inner child, you're important to me, because one of the ways we know someone loves us is they spend quality time. So
Absolutely.
if you can't sit with yourself in quality time and just being with yourself, not doing, not thinking, not feeling, what are you really saying? I can't be with me. I don't like me. So
Yes.
I keep looking in the outer world for something to fill that gaping hole inside.
Yep. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, I call that my Swiss cheese theory of trauma. We look towards the outside to fill up all those holes that we have, and we have to fill them up from the inside out in
Right.
order
So
to
when we
really
close
grow.
our eyes to the outer world, when we're meditating, we're making our inner world more real than the outer 3D world. And when you do that, that's when you become supernatural. That's, whatever, if my soul's old and I chose those parents, that was the big game changer for me. When I took on an idea that I don't know if it's true, but how do I feel when I tell myself, I chose an alcoholic, abusive father that was neglectful and negligent and left us and sexually molested me and abused my mom and my brother and did me on one occasion, abused me physically. A mother who put a gun to my head, who did all these horrible things, slice her wrist, in and out of mental institutions, like chaos, chaos, chaos. When I started to think, wait a minute, what if what Dr. Weiss was saying in that book was I chose those parents because I had debts or I had some kind of karmic, I have to pay back something. I started to view myself as a pretty badass soul, a pretty strong soul, instead of seeing myself as a victim of white trash, being impoverished, all the things that I grew up with. I began to view myself at a young age in my early 20s as like, dang, I must be destined for something special.
Yes. And absolutely, absolutely. It makes so much sense. It really, really does.
Thank you. I think so too. It's like, I just was working with a client from Canada. She was here and she was a wonderful, wonderful client. But she was so indoctrinated from her childhood with damnation and sin and heaven and hell. And she was very constricted and worried. She wanted to let it go. She wanted to believe in a creator that wants us, that gives us free will and says, I'm not going to get mad at you if you fail school. I'm
Right.
not going to sentence you to eternal damnation if you don't pass,
Right. Yes.
it's you that's creating heaven or hell on this earth, and I give you free will to do it. So she was, wanting to let that go and just being with her and seeing how, because it's been so long for me since I
Yeah.
was in that place, to have compassion for her that, she was still very constricted and afraid.
Right. And that, it governed my life forever and ever, is that fear-based thinking. I went through my entire childhood that way. It developed into that way as a teen, and then as an adult, just that constant hypervigilance. And it is really hard. It's like a doom loop, trying to get yourself out of it
Exactly.
and become unstuck. Get yourself past that point and open up your mind to new ideas and
And
new
always
ways of
admit
thinking.
we don't know. Out of the known universe, if you look this up, these are the numbers. Out of everything human knows, right? We're talking about the brightest, the Einsteins of our time. We only know, they say, 4%. 96% is dark matter and dark energy, which means we haven't pierced into it. All it takes is just take somebody back 20 years ago. We didn't have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Like, it was here, but we hadn't accessed it. What haven't we accessed now that's here that we can't even see, right? So we
Yes.
live in a mystery. And soon as you start saying, nope, my holy book says this, and this is the truth, when it was man who wrote it, man, and they say, oh, it was inspired by God. Well, there's plenty of books. My book's inspired by God, we have to begin to have some autonomy and self-responsibility, that the life that we're creating we are the creator. We are the ones creating it, because this creator that created us gives us free will and says, hey, go for it.
Yeah.
You're going to believe you're not worthy? Okay. That's what you're going to get. You
Yeah.
gonna believe you're worthy? Okay, let me show you how worthy you are. It
Right.
really is that simple.
Sure. It putting out into the universe what you want in return.
Exactly.
And
Well, and it's not even putting it out. You're not putting it out. You're internalizing a new thought pattern.
yes.
Like I got a message when I was little, I was bad girl, bad girl, bad girl. And then I was poor, so then it was like, I'm not good enough. I never have enough. I didn't have enough clothes, enough food. It was always not enough. And then that became my default, like a computer.
Yes.
So then I went about my life. I leave home. I get to college. I look through a lens at all the girls still. Oh, I'm still not good enough. My hair is not as pretty as them. I compare myself. I always leave me feeling, or anytime anyone's mad at me, I internalize that I'm bad. I did something wrong. So until I was able to unpack those very deep seated from childhood beliefs, those core false beliefs, and bring the light of awareness to them and start to speak differently internally, so that the lens I looked through was different, right? Because I started to say, I am enough and I do matter. And just because my parents were poor white trash and behaved that way doesn't mean I am. And I began to make new choices based on how I was speaking to myself in my own mind, which we're doing all day long.
Right. But, and, that's the saying is you speak to yourself more than you do anybody else. So speak kindly.
Speak kindly. Yeah.
Be thoughtful, be kind, be intentional. And I think that is still something that, so many people struggle with is just, that connection and that tone and that intention, not only with themselves, but then with others. When you're in that scarcity, fear-based mindset, it colors everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's what transformation is. It's death and rebirth. So there's always a part of us. One of my teachers in India, one time I was with her and somebody said, tell us about life. And she started giggling and she said, oh, life is a picnic, but death is the party. And what she meant by that was that every day, she said, you need to invite death into your life like you would a long lost friend. She's talking about it metaphysically, spiritually speaking. There's beliefs, behaviors, ways of being that have to die. It's what the Christ story really is in the resurrection. It's
Right.
not the literal interpretation. It's a death of something and a rebirth. And when you do that, you never age. You never... I'm 57 and a half. I'm close to 62. And I know because I've been meditating so long too, you increase your DHEA and you start looking younger, you feel better. So transformation, even the Bible says, be transformed by the renewing of the mind.
Yes.
Right. We have to keep renewing our mind. When we now know science, with neuroplasticity, that our brain is malleable. Right.
Yeah.
It's not fixed. So we can, even epigenetics is showing that if you stop saying, I was talking to this client or a colleague the other day, helping her, and she said she has celiac, my celiac. I was like, oh, is that your baby, your celiac? You love it so much. It's yours. Right.
Right.
These words, right. Trying is another one.
Yes.
You're implying I'm struggling. Well, then, okay, you must want to struggle. Otherwise you would say, I'm practicing this, or I'm right. You wouldn't use words because words have so much meaning.
True. That's
right.
True.
And so when we're sowing, what we believe about ourselves, right. We want to be really mindful about the words that we're using. But in neuroplasticity, you start thinking differently, receptor sites in the brain begin to fire in different regions of the brain. That's transformation. That's what's so exciting about this work, my emotional healing system. Nothing really I created. It's just stuff I took from all my teachers, right? That I said, this is the system.
Right.
If someone followed this system, then they would see results. But a person who doesn't continue to learn and grow and let parts of themselves die, they don't say things like, that's just how I am. That's how I've always been. I'm stuck in my ways. You can't change an old, all those sayings. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can change. That creates neurorigidity in the brain, which I bet, I don't know if there's research on this, links to Alzheimer's, dementia, links to things because the brain's not constantly getting rewired.
Yes. Yeah. You have to, like you said, it's a muscle. It's like anything else. You have to flex it, exercise it, learn new things, explore, be creative, and all of it. And I don't know if there's a study, but I would absolutely bet that there's links to
that. Yeah.
Dementia and Alzheimer's. And
if you hold a grudge, then, there are studies that show people who can't forgive have heart disease, have higher cases of stroke and, because they've done research where the people who have had that and they talk about their personal lives, they're still holding on to their first, ex and angry and victimized. And, it's a constricted state.
Yeah. It's a complete shift. It's a complete shift for somebody to be able to think that way and open their mind up, to all of those new possibilities. And it's so important.
And just take responsibility, right? It's really about that. It comes down to, I am not a victim. At some point, you have to make that choice that everything's happening for me, not to me.
Yes.
So once, the shit hits the fan, if you can ask the question, okay, what's the lesson here? And get the lesson. Then when the universe, God, spirit, whatever comes back to check you, did you learn the lesson? Then you pass it and then you move on to the next lesson. And that's evolution. That's what we're here to do.
Yes. No, absolutely. And it's so beautifully put. And it's like I said, it sounds simple, but it takes work. It takes work. It takes time. It takes practice. And, all of that. And, I know that another big thing that people struggle with is the idea of, that self-love and that self-compassion piece that, we kind of, is such an intrinsic part of everything we've just been talking about, And
self-love is, I used to think like, Calgon, take me away,
I remember that commercial very well. Yes.
A bubble bath, a day at the spa, go get my nails and toes. Okay. Self-love, I've broken down into 6 ways that we can love ourselves. 1, emotionally. So we're talking about that, the conversation we're having with ourselves. There was a book called Tiny Habits. So you create a tiny habit with a habit you already do. So most of our listeners, I hope you're brushing your teeth every morning. So you create a tiny habit with it. And one of the ways you emotionally love yourself is while you're looking in the mirror and brushing your teeth, you look in your eyes, not at yourself, into yourself. There's a difference, right? And speak lovingly. See the inner child. I tell clients, put a picture of yourself around 4 or 5 years old on your bathroom mirror and gaze at that child and gaze at yourself. And I'm a good person and I'm deserving and I'm proud of you and I love you and I love who you're becoming. And speaking like that emotional connection with your emotional self, that inner child. The second way is physically, eating nutritious food, really limiting processed food, eating whole food, moving your body, getting out and walking, doing things, staying active. A body in motion stays in motion. Physical, speaking kind to your physical body, not judging it, really appreciating it a lot, telling it you're so grateful, and loving your physical body. Then the next one is financially. So children, and think about in all these ways, if you're going to be a healthy, loving adult to the child, yourself, or a child, you would emotionally speak nice to them, say beautiful things, lift them up. You would physically not let them sit on the couch all day and eat Doritos. You would make, feed them good food and get them out playing and moving their body or in sports. third, financially, you would make sure that they're not worried about the lights being turned off, or, that there's, you have savings, you're comfortable, things like that. Financially, things are organized in order. Then spiritually, of course, we develop our self-esteem usually externally from the world. But if you have a parent who's emotionally intelligent, they'll raise the child to find their intrinsic worth. You are worthy regardless of your grades. You are worthy and loved because you're breathing. Like the child will get a message. The parent will model that spiritual connection, that you are a child of God, you are divine, you are lovable. You don't have to do anything for me to love you. But on the worldly side, where most people are raised, because let's face it, it doesn't come with a parenting handbook, right?
Right. Wish it did.
I wish it did. I keep thinking that would be a good book to write.
It would. Except it would be your interpretation of good parenting and not necessarily everyone else's.
Yeah, it would be really the skills, right, of
Yes.
what a good parent is. And that would be, how to love and parent yourself. And, so spiritually, meditating, being in nature, having stillness and silence. We live so plugged in, unplugging sometimes, letting your nervous system really unwind and be calm. Spiritually is so important to me. It's the most important because that's what we are, a spiritual being having a human experience, right?
Yes.
And then organizationally. So organizationally, children thrive in organized environments, right? So we thrive in organized. We want to have our cars clean. Cleanliness is next to godliness, but it's not just about cleanliness. It's about organization, right? Not being scattered. And
yes.
And then the last one is relationships. We love ourselves through the mirror of relationship. We are always in relationship, always, with partners, with ourselves, with our children, with coworkers, with the community. And so when we love ourselves through relationship, the relationship is mirroring. It's holding up a mirror. Do I respect myself? Do I love myself? It's just mirroring back to me the relationship I have with myself.
Yeah. And that's so beautifully put.
I want to, if I'm loving myself, I'm not going to be in relationships with people who are dismissive or disrespectful. I teach people, to use a Dr. Philism, how to treat me.
Right.
So if they're treating me, I have to assume, they don't know that that's not acceptable. I set a boundary. Hey, when you do this, that doesn't work for me. Next time they do it, hey, I told you that when you do that, so if you do it again, I'm going to hang the phone up on you. I'm going to, rethink my relationship with you. And if they do it again, done.
Right.
Even family, divorce them.
Yep. Yes.
Be done. I don't have a relationship with anybody except for my brother. It's very limited. And one cousin in my family of origin. Yeah. And now an aunt, since I wrote the book, or not an aunt, she's a second cousin. She's kind of resurfaced. So she's like 80 years old, so, but I don't have relationship because they didn't respect me and they judged me. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't judge me and I respect me. So that doesn't work for me.
That's right. And those boundaries, those limits are so important. And that's what, people who have lived experience with trauma have such a hard time with, and I did my mom passed away many years ago. Mm-hmm. She had so many health issues and we knew she wasn't going to live a long life. She made it to 52, which was amazing. And then my dad just passed away in 2021. And, my contact with him was very limited. Mm-hmm. And, I had other people in my family going, well, why don't you do this? And why don't you go see him? I'm like, I can't do that. I can't put myself out there like that, because he has no idea that what he does, how it affects me. So I need to be the one to set that limit and say, I'm not going to expose my heart to this anymore. Yeah. but it is everybody's, like, but that's your parent. And, they did this for you and they did that for you. And I'm like, well, okay, yeah, that's very true. But on the flip side, here's all this other stuff that happened. And
Right.
it changed me. And so, now as a grown up, I can say no more,
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you get raised either as a taker or a caretaker, and people are predominantly one over the other. And
I was a caretaker.
And it creates codependency. And so if you saw mom and dad behaving that way, usually it's dad's the taker, mom's the caretaker. And traditionally, you don't have to have addiction to have codependency. I think a lot of people think, Melody Beattie's book came out many years ago, and Codependent No More, and it was very popular in the 12-step programs. But really, at its core, it's about relationship, and it's about saying, I am not responsible for your feelings at all, unless I have an intent to hurt you. Right. Then I'm responsible. But then, ultimately you have to do, either not have a relationship with me or whatever if I'm intentionally hurting you. Right.
Right.
But caretakers believe that they are responsible for other people's feelings, even if they did not have an intention to hurt them.
Yep.
And they got hurt. Oh, I'm bad. I did something wrong. I'm a recovering caretaker as well. Now I call myself a caregiver.
Yes.
Because as a healthy adult, my primary purpose is to receive love from God, the truth that I am good and I am lovable, and then give that to myself first, prime my own pump, fill up my cup, so I have plenty to give to others.
Yeah, absolutely. It spills over into everything else.
Yeah.
And that, and I did that. I took care of my mom. I raised my sister until she died, and then, took care of everybody else. And then, I got to middle age and my kids were grown and they left. And I'm like, well, who am I now?
Yeah.
Because you measure, when you have that mentality, you measure your self-worth by how much you do for others, how well they respond to what you do, how.
And if they don't, then you're resentful.
Absolutely. Or then if there's something wrong, I must have done something wrong. And it was that way with my jobs. I identified myself through my work and how hard I worked and, all of that. And then when you get to the point where you go, well, wait a minute, that can't work. That doesn't work,
Or I'm depleted and and you'll keep attracting takers. Those are the people who point the finger and call you selfish when you do something for yourself, because you point the finger, you got 3 pointing back at you, right? It's projection. Yep. They don't like you taking care of yourself because you're not taking care of their needs. Because takers, unlike caretakers, believe that others are responsible. They, at their core, believe they can't take care of themselves, that they need some connection to someone else or they'll die. They feel very, insecure and not able to care for themselves because they're so disconnected.
Right. Right.
And then the caretaker, when you unpack it enough, you'll see there's a lot of martyrdom. There's a lot of selfishness because they're doing it almost from a place of superiority. If they knew themselves well enough, they'd see that they're actually are being selfish because they're doing it because it makes them feel good. Right. Because as soon as the other person's not appreciative, they take offense. I'm so kind. I'm so loving. Believe me, I did this with I had 5 stepchildren in my first marriage.
Oh my.
Gave. And I was always in a story about how ungrateful they were. Yeah. Well, but why was I giving to ungrateful people? Then I was to blame, not them.
Right. And I think that's why so many people too, and it happened to me, get pulled into relationships involving domestic violence, intimate partner violence, because it's that, you just segue from caretaking one person or group of people and you get sucked into something else because you don't have the ability to understand who you are and your needs and that your needs are okay. Right. And, so you just get sucked into that whole thing, which is, that's a whole other subject. But I mean, it leaves you very vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, most people, to have to love yourself and accept yourself, there's nothing greater that you can do. Because the way I teach people is just think about yourself as a child. Look at this picture. Like I have this picture of me, I'm like 4 here. Now I look at that little girl and I think she was going through a lot, and my heart softens and I think she is me. Like, and wow, she was brave and she was strong. And then I want to befriend her. I want to give her the happy childhood. It's never too late to have a happy childhood. Or I've changed it now on my website. It says now is the time for a happy childhood.
Yeah, which is amazing. And, it's funny. I would, for a long time, I would pull out pictures of, myself as a little girl with my parents, and everybody was happy and smiling. And I would look at them and go, boy, if you knew what was coming down the road for you, what would you do? How would you look now? If you knew, if you could see into the future, and what a nightmare it was going to become, know. And I had to change that. I did the same thing. I'm like, you need to have love and compassion for that little kid, because look what she survived and got through and learned. And,
then you bow to yourself. You're like, darn, I'm amazing. I got through all of that. And here I am,
Yeah.
And then that makes you start to fall in love with yourself. And we're talking about self-love, and you begin to really see, your trajectory through life and the choices that made you, who you are and where you are today. And then you're always home, because home is where the heart is. And so you feel good in your skin. You feel comfortable. You're authentic. You're not fake. You're not people pleasing. You're not trying to fix people. And, you're just, I'm me.
You're just you.
And you be you. And we're all good.
Yeah, that's right. And if you don't accept me for who I am, that's just fine. You can do your thing and I'll do mine. And
because you accept yourself. And when you accept yourself, I tell people, because I teach shadow work, when you feel, I ask this question, do you care what people think about you? And a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I care what people think. Oh, you say, no, you don't. You only care what you think.
Yeah.
Think about it. So is there a time when people give you compliments and tell you you're beautiful, or the meal you cooked, or how amazing you are, blah, 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 and you deflect it and you can't receive it?
Yep.
That right there tells you don't care what they think.
Yeah.
Now they judge you and you think you care what they think, because why? You agree with them. Had you agreed with them on the positive, you could have accepted the compliment. And that's how you can unpack, oh, I really don't care what do I think they think of me? And you go to the worst case scenario and you just say, yeah, there's a part of me. Parts therapy, it's like we are a whole being. God created us whole, but we fragment based on our conditioning. So we end up, identifying ourselves as not smart enough, or, an idiot, or a failure because a marriage failed, or whatever it is. And then as soon as we begin to identify with that part and someone comes along and pokes at it and makes mention of it or says something, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, you don't care what they think. You had already made the judgment.
Yes.
So you just have to realize it's just a part of my pie, my big pie, just a slice. It's not the totality. And love and accept it. It's a little child who got a message at a young age, not to be something. And then when we are that way, because we're multidimensional beings, we have every quality that exists on this planet. It has a potential to exist within us. Murder, any. Well, you start to have compassion for yourself and your fellow human, because you realize, that we are everything. And there's reasons why we behave the way we do, because we were arrested, developed when we were children. And we want to have the maturity to go back to that little, child and rescue them, and let them know I'm here. And mom and dad didn't do a great job, but now I'm here and I'm going to show you.
Right.
And that's what my wise little one showed me, was, oh my God, you've given me an amazing life. And when she did that, I fell in love with myself. I began to really honor and value. I'm not perfect at it, and there's times where I don't, but overall, I'm very at peace with myself and who I am, because I have tools, right, to know how to get through when I'm not.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, everything starts with learning how to be regulated. Nothing can happen without that.
Exactly. Because then you're incoherent and you're not even thinking clearly.
Yeah. That's exactly right. So you have to be able to learn how to regulate yourself and then work on it from there, and it's like, I describe it as the foundation of a house. If you're looking at building a house from nothing, that first foundational piece, that concrete slab, that's you. That's where you start. And
that's meditation.
Yes. Yes.
It is. It's mindfulness. It's being aware that I'm creating my reality based on what I'm thinking.
Right.
My thoughts are a derivative of my beliefs. If I keep thinking a thought, it's going to turn into a belief. And the belief might not even be true. Like the example of I'm a bad girl, or I'm not good enough, or, all of those things. So the foundation of healing is to get still and quiet and know the truth of who you are, that you are a spiritual being having a human experience. You're here to learn and grow. You're here to give something greater back to the world, not be a taker and just take.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's such, and that's such a beautiful way to end the conversation. It's just, just even listening to you and, when that, yourself that you put out there is just so calming and so wonderful. And I thank you so much for your time. I know how valuable your time is, and I know you must be crazy busy. So thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and experiences and all of it. So everybody go to janawilson.com and you can pre-order the book, right? Wise little one. You can pre-order it, and it's going to be available wherever you buy your books. Amazon. You're going to do Audible too, correct?
Yeah. I'm in the studio this week recording the book. I'm going to read it.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. I'm so excited for that. And check her out. You can find she's in New Mexico. She lives off the grid with her husband and loves her animals and loves her space. So go check out her website, please. And I'll put all the links into the show notes. And again,
also, too, Terry, put the emotional healing retreats. There is a link on Jana Wilson. But if somebody was interested to coming to one of the retreats, we have one coming up in September in Florida, where I'm from. And it's a 5-day retreat. It goes over Labor Day. It starts on Labor Day and it goes that week. And we teach all this emotional healing system. My husband, who's a physician, he co-leads it with me. And my daughter, Taylor, who's 34, almost 35, she's the yoga instructor. And so we kind of have a whole family affair.
That's wonderful. I love that. Yes, I will absolutely put the link to the retreat for sure. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
I appreciate you too. Big hug, Terry.
Yeah, you too. And take care, and we'll be hearing from you real soon.
Okay. Thanks, Terry.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening today. And please keep on listening. Wherever you listen, please like, subscribe, favorite, follow me, and share widely. You can find me on Facebook at Invisible Wounds Healing from Trauma, on Twitter at Carrie Walker 58, my YouTube channel, Invisible Wounds Healing from Trauma, and my website, invisiblewoundshealingfromtrauma.com. Please take extra good care of yourself, and we'll talk soon.